In this video, I'm going to show you how to do a self-assessment of your hip mobility and function. Whether you're one of my clients or you're following one of my programs or just anyone else's programs, or you're just curious about what your range is, I'm going to show you some simple movements you can do at home that if you film yourself doing this self-assessment, you could periodically check your range every couple weeks or every couple months to see the progress you're making. So most of these moves are going to be standing. Now, if you feel unstable trying to stand on one leg, you could simply use whatever you have that's a stick. Most people have a broom at home for balance, or you can even lean up against the wall for support. So before our function, we're going to test our mobility. First thing we're going to test is our hip flexion and extension. One thing I want you to take note is, like if I put my hands on my sides right here, during these hip movements, I don't want my pelvis moving or shifting at all. And for flexion and extension, you can film yourself from the side, and I'm going to test my left side first. I'm just going to drive that knee as high to my chest as possible without moving through the pelvis or the spine. That's about my active range right there, and you want to hold it for a second or two just to make sure you can maintain that range. And then going into extension, we just go the opposite direction. So I'm trying to kick back without extending or moving my pelvis or spine. Hold it for a second or two, come back. Then I'll test my right side. I'm going to drive that all the way up as high as I can. Nice. Bring it down, drive backwards, beautiful. Again, try not to move that pelvis. So there's our flexion and our extension. Next, we're going to check our adduction, or going towards midline, and our abduction, going away from midline. I always test that from a head-on view, so I'm going to check my left side first. I'm just going to bring my hip up to a 90-degree angle, or a 90-degree hip flexion angle. And then from here, I'm going to bring my knee inwards as far as I can without rotating through the pelvis. That's about my end range. And then now I'm going to rotate outwards without shifting that pelvis. That's about my end range. And then bring it back, reset. We'll do the other side. Up to 90, bring it towards midline, nice. Now bring it away from midline. Again, holding it for a second or two. So there's 4 movements. We got 2 more, and that's our hips rotational ability. Now to test that rotation, I'm going to bring my hip up to 90 degrees of flexion. And now I'm just going to try to bring my foot inward as much as possible while trying not to shift the femur at all. So this is testing that external rotation. That's about my end range. Back to neutral, and then now we want to test that internal rotation, again without hiking that pelvis. And then holding it for a second or two, and then we'll test the other side. Up to 90, bring foot inward, external rotation. Hold it, reset, internal rotation, hold it, reset, boom. Now that's a very quick and simple way to test your own hip mobility through all 6 of its ranges of motion. Next, we're going to move on to our hip function, and we're just going to do some common movement patterns. First one is just a squat. So bring your feet as wide as what feels comfortable for you, and we're simply just going to squat with our hands out in front of us. And of course, I'll show that from the side, trying to squat as low as we can while feeling comfortable. Hold it for a second or two, and then come back up. Next, we're going to do a lunge on both sides. So I'm going to step forward, lunge down. I like showing this from the front view just so you can see any wobbling or balance issues. Then we're going to move on to the other side. Perfect. If you want extra credit, you can film it from the side. There's nothing wrong with that. Here, hold it for a second or two, come back up. And then same thing, hold for a second or two, and then come back up. We tested our hip mobility. We tested 2 very common movement patterns that we use on a daily basis. Lastly, we're just going to check 2 positions. The first one, we just need a chair for, and all we're going to do is simply bring one leg on top of the other. Now, some of you might have a lot of tension for this. Just bring it up as high as you can, and that's why I like taking a video, because you can screenshot your highest level if you're not able to bring that over the top. And then of course you would test the other side. You can tell I got a lot more tension on my left side here. And then another common position we could check is just sitting on the ground, cross-legged. So usually we sit in the pattern that's most comfortable. I'm pretty comfortable right here. You might be up here. Everybody's capacities are different. That's why we train these things. And then once you test one side, just switch to the other and then see if there's any major changes from side to side. And that's how in a matter of minutes, we can get a baseline assessment of your hip mobility, your hip function, and also how your hip feels in certain positions. Like I mentioned in the beginning, this is something you would want to film so then you could track it periodically. So if you're about to start a program, film it before you start, see what your baselines are, and then every week, 2, or even a month, you would recheck your movements, recheck your baselines, so then you can see that function and mobility starting to improve.